I was motivated to join the military because my family has a long-standing military tradition. My father, grandfather, and great-grandfather were all in the Navy. Uh, my older brother and I were in the Marine Corps, and my younger brother was in the Navy as well. So military has just been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. My primary job was 0351 anti-tank assaultman. We did work with demolitions and rockets and all around getting into places that people didn't want us to get into. The majority of my time was served at Camp Pendleton in California. A lot of my time off was spent up in LA and down in San Diego. I met a lot of famous people just bumping into them on the street, but the most special to me was a USO show when I was deployed to Iraq. I got to meet Robin Williams, Kid Rock, Lance Armstrong, and Lewis Black. And Robin Williams had been a hero of mine since I was a child, playing Genie in Aladdin. So getting to meet him was really awesome.
Well, I think that, like a lot of our students, I was looking for something, a way to improve my situation. And I knew that I could go into the military because when I was in high school, some of my friends took the ASVAB. And so I took it just because they were taking it. But as it turned out, I scored high enough that a recruiter started calling, and so I knew that that was always an option. As it turned out, my mom wouldn't sign for me to join when I was 17. She said that you have to be 18 and make that decision for yourself. And so I kind of kept it in the back of my head, and really, I mean, when things got that bad, when things got bad enough that 3 meals a day and a rack to sleep on was a big improvement in my life, I took that option. So after training, I went through a lot of training to become a field radio repairman. And so I was trained to troubleshoot radios all the way down to the littlest components, the diodes and the resistors and whatnot. But then my actual job was to take radios from radio operators and give it to the people who troubleshot down to that component. And sometimes it was turn it on and give it back to the operator. You've got to turn it on. But a lot of times there really was a problem, and we needed to determine where was the problem. Is the problem in the handset? Is the problem in this radio? Is it in the antenna? Where is it? And so that was my major job, and for the most part, I did that attached to an AAV unit, which is Assault Amphibious Vehicles, which are sort of like a tank that drives off the back of a ship and into the water and then comes up on the shore and lets out the infantry. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, you've seen a version of those. They now have hatches on the top as well as the outside. My service really split up into 3 different segments. There was one which was just sort of a catch-all. That was boot camp and MCT and that kind of stuff. Then for a year I spent training to become a field radio repairman in 29 Palms, California, which is also where they send people to train for Afghanistan and Iraq. It's a severe desert environment, and tanks are out there. But I was there for a year to train to be a radio repairman. And then I was stationed after that. I got very lucky. I was first squad leader, and the guide and the platoon sergeant were given orders to Hawaii, to Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. And the sergeant couldn't take them, so as first squad leader, I got to take those orders. And so I was stationed for 2.5 years on Kaneohe Bay, Hawaii. But for a year of that, I was doing 6-month tours of Asia attached to that AAV unit. It was a really beautiful duty station. There was a lot of really cool things about it, but I didn't get to spend as much time there as what it shows up on paper. It's important to preface this with the fact that I served under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So this was a rule that said that people could serve in the military who were gay as long as they didn't ever get caught being gay. And as long as nobody asked them and nobody told, then it was okay. And I just mention that because the one person who most influenced me in the military is also somebody that I jokingly say is the gayest Marine ever to serve under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And we called him Staff Sergeant Gigi, which was his initials. And he took me aside one day because I had been called out to call cadence, and I didn't do a very good job of it. And he was giving me these just very decent pointers, you know, use a song that other people know, try to sing to a rhythm. You know, he was giving me good pointers. And I was frustrated when he left, and I kind of just yelled. And I ran into him later, and I was just sort of gushing this apology. I'm sorry, Staff Sergeant, I respect you. I didn't mean to disrespect you, blah, 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 blah. And he said, don't apologize, just don't do it. And I thought, what a jerk. And about 2 years later, I thought, what a brilliant man. He really had his finger on the pulse of something there. I was so good at apologizing that I didn't worry about living in such a way that I didn't need to apologize. And so he was probably the biggest influence on me of all of my time in the military.
I decided to join the military through ROTC at K-State. I had been at K-State a semester after transferring from Cloud County Community College and was really struggling to pay for tuition, pay my room and board, and I was working full-time while going to school full-time. So I had a friend of mine that was involved in ROTC, and he convinced me just to go over and talk to one of the officers that was assigned to the detachment there at K-State and just look into it. So I did. I went over and decided that that second semester at K-State, I would enroll in a 1 credit hour ROTC leadership course, which I did. That summer, then, I was told, well, if you want to continue in ROTC, you have to go to field training. And so I still hadn't signed the dotted line at that point, but I decided to see if I could get through field training. So the first week of July, I reported to McConnell Air Force Base and went through field training there. I was the only cadet at that field training from Kansas, and as you know, Kansas in July is a pretty hot time of year to be going through field training. Had a 6-week field training course, came back, and basically had about 2 days to decide if I was going to sign the dotted line and commit myself to going into the U.S. Air Force. And they offered me a books and tuition scholarship to finish my degree at K-State. And so I went ahead and accepted that scholarship, and that was when I basically committed to going into the Air Force. Well, I just kind of mentioned field training. They call it field training for officers in the Air Force. It was 6 weeks, the typical running, the different exercises that you go through, the leadership training. It also was about teaching the cadets how to wear the uniform, how to participate in military parades, all of those kind of things. So I went to a mixed field training, meaning that there were both men and women there. There were about probably 275 cadets at the field training session that I went to. In my flight, there were 22 individuals, 18 men and 4 women in my flight. We lived in the old World War II barracks that were at McConnell, which have since been torn down. And the women had the very first room at the top of the stairs, and the guys had the rest of the rooms down the hall. We shared the same bathrooms. We had to work as a team. It was a good experience overall. Something I don't want to do again, but I'm very thankful that I did and learned a lot about myself. Well, I graduated from K-State, and I went on active duty in January of 1988. And my first assignment was to the Los Angeles Air Force Base, working on the space program. It was shortly after the Challenger accident, and so most of the space missions had been grounded due to the shuttle going down, and the Air Force had a number of satellite constellations that they had planned to put up in space on the shuttle. And so we were scrambling to bring back into production the expendable launch vehicles. So I was assigned to work on the Delta II program, the Atlas II program, and the Advanced Launch System program at the time. I did all budget responsibilities as well as cost analysis anytime we had an engineering change order. So those were the programs I worked on. Learned a lot very, very quickly, and from there, from the Los Angeles Air Force Base, I got married about a year after going on active duty, and my husband was assigned to Castle Air Force Base, which is in Central California, and so I worked to get a joint assignment to Castle. Took me about a year to get that assignment, but I transferred there and was chief of the cost analysis branch under the comptroller. So in that role, I served as the base cost analysis officer that anytime the Air Force buys anything from weapon systems to washing machines for the dorms, there has to be a cost analysis done. So that was my responsibility. Also oversaw the economic impact statement that each Air Force base publishes each year to show the impact on the local community. And it happened that my second year at Castle, Castle came out on the base closure list. So I got to present that information many, many times to the local community up until the point where Congress made the decision to go ahead and close Castle Air Force Base. And so again, had a great experience, learned a lot. Some of my favorite memories are both at Los Angeles and also at Castle as it pertains to the military. I did 2 years in Los Angeles and 2 years at Castle Air Force Base. And then Castle was on the base closure list. My husband's squadron was being deactivated, one of the early ones, and so I decided at that point to get out of the Air Force. And we were then transferred to McConnell Air Force Base, where my husband spent a number of years. Went from there to Altus Air Force Base and then back to McConnell Air Force Base. So those were the bases that I have been affiliated with. The first two were active duty and then later as a dependent. Well, there are some lifelong friends that I made in the Air Force, and also some people that I consider mentors or role models for me. One in particular was a colonel at the Los Angeles Air Force Base that I looked up to. He was a former missileer, had sat at a missile silo for a considerable amount of his time. He was an engineer, and he helped us, like I said, bring the expendable launch vehicles back into production, both at McDonnell Douglas, General Dynamics, Boeing. As the Air Force scrambled to put satellites into space on expendable vehicles, his experience as a missileer, he was an engineer, we ended up using a lot of the missiles that were coming out of the silos at the time. We removed the warhead, the nuclear warhead, and replaced those with a fairing in which the satellite would basically ride in until it got to its orbit in space. So he was one of the major engineers and program managers that I have a fond spot in my heart for having been a great mentor for me. And there are a number of other people, but you know, I feel like he's one that kind of took me under his wing and helped me get my assignment to Castle so I could join my husband on my going away picture that everybody signed. He even wrote, "Get it right, Winningham, or I'll come back and I'll come get you," or some, you know, funny thing. He was a great guy. He's passed away now, but wonderful, wonderful officer. For me, I learned a great deal about myself as a person and what I was capable of doing. I think it also helped me become more patriotic and more appreciative of the freedoms that we have in America. I was on active duty during Desert Storm and knew 2 individuals that did not come home from Desert Storm. And I always hope that for every life that is sacrificed for the United States, that those lives aren't given in vain. And I think, personally, I think serving in the military helps a person grow up. It helps a person know what they're capable of doing. It teaches them respect and appreciation that many other professions don't necessarily have the same impact on. I am very, very grateful that was able to serve and know many, many veterans and understand the sacrifices that not only the veteran themselves makes, but their family makes. So I feel like that's the biggest impact on my perspective in the world.